Bonjour, Bonane, good morning, Bande Matram. So this morning we are going to have a great discussion on two great saints, two great personalities, and maybe you can take great gods in human forms. They are Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. So on them, we are going to have a brief discussion in English. We know Ramakrishna is possessing the intuitive mind, intuitive mind, the different great layers of the spiritual mind. So he possesses the intuitive mind, Ramakrishna, and his disciple God, Lord actually Vivekananda, who is most familiar, most popular for his speech in Chicago. That conference he rendered a big speech, and of course for this he is immortal in the history of the religious world. So here we are having some brief discussion on Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, and everything will be discussed in the light of Sri Aurobindo's writings, in his vision, what he has visualized and what he has really sketched. Initially, Sri Aurobindo quotes in his aphorisms beautifully. What was Ramakrishna? That is the question tag. What was Ramakrishna? God manifest in human being. What is Ramakrishna? That is the question. And answer, Sri Aurobindo, of course, answering. God manifest in a human being, but behind there is God in his infinity personality. Behind God is in his infinity possibility. Behind there is God in his infinity personality and his universal personality. Two personalities have Sri Aurobindo quoted. One is infinity personality and his universal personality. Of course, while using his, everywhere he has used capital H. And what is Vivekananda? Next comes, what really is Vivekananda? Who is not the question? Sri Aurobindo puts the question, what is Vivekananda? A radiant glance from the eye of Shiva. A radiant glance from the eye of Shiva, but behind him, same thing. Behind him, the divine gaze from which he came, and Shiva himself, and the Brahma and Vishnu and Om, all exceeding. So just they see how the combined effect of Brahma and Vishnu and Shiva is, of course, being accomplished in Vivekananda. I'll try to quote it again. A radiant glance from the eye of Shiva, but behind him is the divine gaze from which he came. Divine gaze we know from Shiva, and Shiva himself, divine gaze from which he came, and Shiva himself, and Brahma and Vishnu and Om are creating. So just imagine where they have come from and what really they represent. So again, another thing we find in our discussion from aphorism, we can take, of course, what has been discussed, that is aphorism number 158 of Jnana. So 157 also we find some glimpse. Thus said Ramakrishna and thus said Vivekananda. Thus said Ramakrishna and thus said Vivekananda. Yes. Let me know also the truth which the avatars cast not forth into speech. Most of the things are invisible, obscure, kept secret. And the prophet has omitted from his teachings. That's what they have not put forth, cast forth into the speech, and the prophet has omitted from his teachings. There will always be more in God than the thought of man has ever conceived, or tongue of man has ever uttered. Everything is invisible, everything is obscure, everything is hidden, kept secret, because the originality is that avatars have cast not forth into speech, and the prophet has omitted from his teaching. That is what the real happening we see. Again, we can find something like the Lord Krishna, Sri Aurobindo having in his aphorism number 159. He who recognizes not Krishna, Sri Aurobindo quotes, he who recognizes not Krishna, the God in man, recognizes Krishna, the God in man, knows not God entirely, because he is avatari. And of course, Sri Aurobindo has confirmed he himself was a Krishna in his previous avatar, previous birth. But who knows Krishna only knows not even Krishna. Just imagine what is the secrecy, what is the point of to be talked behind the Sri Aurobindo's speaking. Yet is it opposite truth also wholly true? Opposite truth also is wholly true. That if thou canst see all God in a little pale or unsightly and just see scentless flower, then hast thou hold his supreme reality. You have to go deep within, you have to find the secret, you have to know everything, and you must recognize who really Krishna is. Again, we are coming forward to a larger aphorism from Sri Aurobindo. A man came to a scientist and wished to be instructed. A man comes to a scientist, scientist, so wished to be instructed. This instructor showed him the revelation of the microscope and the telescope. Scientist showed him the revelations of the microscope and the telescope. But the man laughed and said, who had come to the scientist, laughed and said, these are obviously hallucinations inflicted by on the eye by the glass which you use as the medium. All these are hallucinations. I will not believe till you show these wonders in my naked seeing. If you can be are able to show me into my naked eyes, then only I may trust or I may believe. Then the scientist proved to him by many collateral facts and experiments by reliability of his knowledge. But the man laughed and said, many things tried in many ways. He tried to convince many things he wanted to prove the reality he wanted to put into surface. Then this man is laughed again and said, "What you term proofs, I term coincidences. The number of coincidences does not constitute proof. As per your experiments, they are obviously effected under abnormal conditions and they constitute a sort of insanity of nature. I am never convinced. I am not at all convinced. You try to show me something else. I want the proof, that is substantial proof." Again, when confronted with the results of mathematics, he was angry and cried. Confronted with the result of mathematics, initially he was laughing. Now itself he is angry and cried out. This is obviously imposture, gibberish, and superstition, nothing else. Three words is book: imposture, gibberish, and superstition. Will you try to make me believe that these assured Kabbalistic figures have any real force and meaning? Can you show the real force and meaning? Can you show me? Then the scientist drove him out of his hopeless, imbecile, out of his hopeless imbecile, because it can't be proved. His crying, his shouting is something else. For he did not recognize his own system of denials and his own method of negative reasoning. If we wish to see in the course, if he wished to refuse an impartial and open-minded inquiry, we can always find the most respectable polysyllables to cover our refusal or impose tests and conditions which actually stultify the inquiry. Different, very difficult, because we are on the surface. That's what we must understand first, because before trying to explain the others or solve the somebody's inquiry. Again, 152. When our minds are involved in matter, very difficult. When our minds are involved in matter, they think matter is the only reality. We know many times, many contradictions. Matter is the truth, Brahma is lie. If all is Brahma, then matter has got no existence. If all are matter, then spirit is a lie. Many Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya, like Jagat Satya Brahma Mithya. So many ways we contradict and we try to prove ourselves. And here in the course here, when our minds are involved in matter, they think matter is the only reality. Then again, when we draw back into immaterial consciousness, after matter, Sri Aurobindo comes to the immaterial consciousness, then what happens? Then we see matter is a mask and feel existence in consciousness alone is having the touch of reality. That is the difference really. I want to quote it again, I want to explain it again rather. When our minds are involved in matter, these minds think matter is the only reality. Then again, when really we find what happens, when we find draw back into the immaterial consciousness, not matter, then we see matter a mask and feel existence in consciousness alone having a touch with reality. That is the difference between matter and immaterial consciousness. Who is then of these two? Who is then of these two is the truth? That's what Sri Aurobindo wants to a question. How you will find the conclusion and where you will reach? Nay, God knoweth, but he who had both experiences can easily tell which conditions is more fertile in knowledge, the mightier and the more blissful. For that actually, so you must have the experience, you must go deep within. That's what that touch must be there, experiencing touch. Anyway, again we still in the course. I have immaterial consciousness to be truer than the material consciousness. The two consciousness have been bifurcated and of course differentiated by Sri Aurobindo's writing. I believe immaterial consciousness to be truer, actually superiority. Immaterial consciousness to be truer than the material consciousness, because I know in the past, I mean in immaterial consciousness, what is in the past, what in the second is hidden from me. I know in the past they could see, but I know in the past what in the second is hidden from me, and also can command what the mind knows is in matter. So matter mind, it is almost it is almost contradictory, and of course it is confined. So second phase we have to go for the immaterial consciousness. That's what has got the truer and the greater vision and meaning. Again we are coming forward the next one, that is heaven and hell exist in the soul's consciousness. Most of the time we feel heaven and hell, somebody in hell, so many descriptions you can get in religious texts. So heaven and hell during the course will exist only in soul's consciousness. Aye. Do so does the earth and its lands and the seas and the fields, entire thing, earth and the land and the seas and the fields and the desert and the mountains and the rivers. All world is nothing but arrangement of the soul's thing. Entire thing, see, Soragya, Naragya. So you can find everything, whatever you see, that is the soul's thing. Everything soul sing. Of course you can find everything heaven and hell that exists only in the soul's consciousness. We are marching forward. There is only one soul and one existence. Very interesting. There is only one soul and one existence. Therefore, we all see one objectivity only. As one soul, one existence, we can find only one objectivity. But there are many knots of mind and ego. Many knots of mind and ego in the soul existence. Therefore, we all see the one object in a different lights and shadows. That is what here in the quoted. Very interesting. First is soul, one existence. So we see one objectivity only. Second, here in the comes, there are many knots of mind and ego. Many knots of mind and ego in the one soul existence. Therefore, we find one object in different lights and different signs. That is what the great description, and of course a great thing has been put forward by Sri Aurobindo. Great idea. The idealist here, very interesting. The idealist here, not it is not mind which is created the worlds. The idealist who possesses the ideal and who of course prefers and believes in idea. The idealist here, it is not mind which created the worlds, but that which created mind has created them. Very interesting, very true thing, obscure, nothing, no obscurity in it, nothing falsehood, only very straightforward question from Sri Aurobindo we can find. The idealist here, it is not mind which created the worlds, but the thing is that which created the mind created them. So he is the creator. That is the difference between mind and of course the Lord. Mind only missees, but it partially and by details. But it sees partially by detail what is created. That's what the mind, the function of the mind and of the function of the creator who has created the mind has created all. So it is with the partiality, with the partial reference, we can feel the entire thing we know. Again, Son, the barren snare of the empty metaphysics. Here in the quotes. Son, the barren snare of an empty metaphysics, and of course, the dry dust of an unfertile intellectuality. You just both the things you try to son them. Number one, you son the barren snare of an empty metaphysics, and the dirty dust of an unfertile intellectuality. Only that knowledge is worth having which can be made use for the living delight. Metaphysics and intellectuality, these are of very little use for us, but things are which then you have to son them. Then what is useful for us, that is actually worth having, which is made use of the living delight and put into temperament, action, creation and being. That's what to be taken care of. But if we possess this intellectuality, metaphysics, we follow the metaphysics, so these are not coming to the coming directly to influence our temperament, living delight and action, creation and being, which will be helpful for that. That's what we will try to refer and take reference. Again in 161 we find, become and live the knowledge thou hast. Become and live the knowledge that thou hast. Then is it thy knowledge and the living God within thee. Very really touching aphorism we can find here from Sri Aurobindo. Become and live the knowledge thou hast. Knowledge definitely you have. With the knowledge you are proceeding, you are of course living, you are capitalizing your resources. So become and live the knowledge you thou have. Then then is thy knowledge. This knowledge is living God within thee. So that has which you have, that must be utilized in the proper sense. Again we can find about the evolution is not finished. Reason, first here in the quoted, evolution is not finished. Reason is not the last word, nor the reasoning animal the supreme figure of the nature, because in the process of evolution or towards the peak, now it is in the middle. So many things are going to happen, so many good things are going to happen, we want to see. So evolution is not finished. Reason is not the last word, nor reasoning animal is not animal the supreme figure of nature. As man emerged out of animal, so that what will happen? So out of man the superman emerges. Very great thing is there, because in the process of evolution, even if it seems a slow process, but thing is that it is there, it is going on. From monkey we have evolved till to this dignified human being, and out of which is we are flying that divine man, superman is going to emerge and of course take the lead. But thing is that Sri Aurobindo course, that's what Sri Aurobindo tries to explain, but in different format, in his own style. Evolution is not finished. Reason is not the last word, nor the reasoning animal the supreme figure of nature. As man emerged, very interesting, as man emerged out of the animal, so out of man the superman emerges. That is a great thing. Again, towards the end, we are going to see a good thing. The power to observe law rigidly is the basic basis of freedom. The power to observe law is the basis of freedom. Therefore, in most disciplines, the soul has to endure and fulfill the law in the lower member before it can rise up to the perfect freedom of the divine being. So great thing, very interesting. The power to observe law rigidly is the basis of freedom. Therefore, what happens? Most disciplines In most disciplines, the soul has to endure and fulfill two things. The soul has to endure and fulfill the law in the lower members before it can rise up to the perfect freedom of the divine being. Those disciplines which began with freedom, those disciplines which began with freedom are only for the mighty ones who are naturally free and former lives have founded their freedom. So it is a great thing, great word, great description on the great freedom what really we feel. So about the power discipline which have imposed the law, and of course this is the choice of the soul that has been differentiated. Those disciplines which begin with freedom are only the mighty ones who are naturally free and former lives have founded their freedom. Anyway, it's time to stop here. Bande Mataram.